Welcome back. This is our continuing lecture on theory of reasoned action and theory of planned behavior. This is part two, or deux, or zwei, or dos, or whatever other language I don't actually speak. Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this is sort of a long one, so settle in, stretch out your writing hands, get your cold Pepsi. Let's do this. I'm going to be focusing on this lecture on the theory of reasoned action. Again, the theory of planned behavior is the theory of reasoned action sort of zhuzhed up. So right now, this one is just a theory of reasoned action, which is to say I'm going to be talking about attitudes and subjective norms. So those two major elements, attitudes and subjective norms. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of numbers are involved. It's right. Just know that. When we're talking about attitudes, as I've discussed before, attitudes have to do with the outcomes of behavior, right? Or I say it's about behavior outcomes, right? So it's about the outcomes of behavior. As an example, I was a pretty dutiful child, and still to this day, I'm a fairly nervous person, I suppose. And so when you said, if you smoke, you can get lung cancer, well, I was not going to smoke because I did not want lung cancer. By the way, I still am not a tobacco user, but I'm saying, like, that really, as a kid, that really became ingrained in me about the risk of lung cancer. And of course, at the time, I didn't know my father died of lung cancer, right? But that was a very serious thing. The attitudes itself, how we get to that, is actually broken up by two components. And this is why I think the theory is so fascinating. Really sort of, I feel like it nails down all the details, all the factors that need to be considered. The first part that makes up the attitude is belief evaluation. Belief evaluation has to do with how good or how bad would the outcome be. How bad would lung cancer be? Well, it seems to me like lung cancer would be pretty terrible. I mean, the average life expectancy following diagnosis of lung cancer is 6 to 9 months because we catch it so late, right? So, yeah, it seems like lung cancer would be bad, right? But if you have an evaluation, right, it can be a thing is good or a thing is bad. And we would score that on a scale. +3 at one end, -3 at the other end. That's if you have a 7-point scale, +3 at one end, -3 at the other end. You could do a 5-point scale. There's nothing wrong with that, in which case you would have +2 to +3, because, you know, +2, +1, 0, -1, -2 is a 5-point. Right. Okay. More math talk than you wanted. But yeah, so belief evaluation is, what do I think about that possible outcome? And I talked before about, you know, persisting through school. All right, so if I get a college degree, I'm likely to make more money over the course of my life, right? And how good is that? And it doesn't have to be +3. It could be, I mean, it would be nice, but it's not the most important thing, so it's a +2, or it's a +1, right? Or maybe some people say, you know, more money, more problems, and give it a -2. I am not such a person. I'd like everybody in the state, who I'm sure is watching this, to know as a state employee, feel free to pay me more. I won't be offended. Okay. There's belief evaluation, and there's belief strength. And belief strength has to do with how likely do I think it is I will experience that outcome. How likely do I think it is I will experience that outcome? So you believe if I persist through college, I'm likely to make more money over my lifetime than if I don't finish my college degree. And we have lots and lots and lots of data that shows that that's generally very, very true. So I think it will happen on a scale, on a 7-point scale, it's actually a 7, versus at the other end is a 1. So it's a scale from 1 to 7. The scales, they're both 7-point scales that way, but they don't totally mirror each other. As I said, I was a pretty dutiful kid. As an adult, still pretty much so as well. And so I might not have said that I thought that if I were to smoke, it was a 7, I was absolutely going to get lung cancer, but I probably would have put it at a 5. Actually, given my father's own death from lung cancer after having smoked, I'd probably move it up to at least a 6, right? But anyway, how likely do you think it is to happen? You know, if you think it's really probably I'm going to have, whatever that outcome is I'm going to have, it's a 7. And if you think, yeah, it's not likely to happen to me, it's a 1. You might think about this as sort of like buying a lottery ticket, right? How great would it be to win the lottery? +3, no brainer. Okay. How likely do you think it is you're going to win the lottery? Oh, I do not think that is going to happen. Okay, so that may be what strongly affects me, for instance, not buying a lottery ticket. But if you say, well, I don't know, it's got to happen to somebody, So you're not a 7 maybe you're not a 1, but it might at least be like a 3 or a 4. And so using those numbers, we do actual math, like multiplication, right? So we take whatever was the belief evaluation, +3, -3, something in between, and we multiply it by whatever the number is for belief strength, somewhere between 1 and 7, right? And that is the attitude component for that one attitude. And so when I say attitude component, I mean for a specific outcome of a behavior. Because a behavior has multiple outcomes to it, even if let's go back to talking about smoking for a minute. So one outcome is lung cancer. One outcome is the sort of deleterious effects it has on your skin. But maybe another outcome is seeming cool, right? People liking you more because you look cool when you smoke, right? Being sexier, right? There's a variety of different outcomes we can associate with any behavior. So each one of these, lung cancers would be one component, right? Skin aging faster would be another component. Looking sexy would be another component, right? And so again, to figure that attitude component, we take the score. So for example, if whatever behavior was, someone said, well, that sounds pretty bad, and it's a -3, and you say, well, do you think it's going to happen to you? And they say, oh, no, I am not worried about that. Okay, well, great. When we multiply that, right, that -3 times that -1, or that just that 1, not negative, just that 1, what we end up with is a -3. And so the number -3 in and of itself doesn't really mean anything. We have to think about it in relationship to other things, right? If you had thought this thing is bad, -3, and I absolutely think it's going to happen, that score would have been a -21. And if you thought, well, that thing is so awesome, like winning the lottery, and I absolutely think it's going to happen, well, that would be a +21, right? So those would be the extremes, right? And this number thing about the extremes is going to keep coming up. So if you're not getting that, seriously, back it up and watch it again, right? As much fun as that sounds like, I know, right? Yeah. So again, the extremes are the 21s, -21 and +21. In this case, for whatever the behavior is, whatever the outcome is, it doesn't matter in this example. It's a -3. So a -3 doesn't mean that the person thinks that doing the behavior is going to be a great thing, but it compared to being possibly -21, -3 is pretty far from -21. So it means that this thing is probably not doing a whole lot to impact the person's likelihood of engaging in the behavior. If that doesn't quite make sense, just hold on, we're going to get there. Or you can go back and rewatch it. But like I said, that is an attitude component for that one. Let's say it is smoking and lung cancer. If you say, I think getting lung cancer would be awful, -3, but I really don't think I'm going to get lung cancer, then that would be a 1, that's a -3. It means that the fear or the thought of getting lung cancer is not going to deter you, or is not what deters you from smoking. Right? As we put in all the other outcomes, as I said, there's lung cancer, there's skin aging, there's looking sexy, right? All of those components together added up, right, would be the total score for attitude. Right? That's how that works. If it's not clear yet, don't worry. We're going to talk about it some more. And if it is clear, well, I'm sorry, we're going to talk about it some more. So here would be some sample survey items. And this one has to do with using a condom during sex. So if there was a belief evaluation of, for instance, here, ruining the mood during sex, we'd ask somebody, well, what do you think about that? How undesirable versus how desirable is that? Probably nobody's going to say, I would imagine, but sure, for somebody out there, right? But for the most part, no one's going to say, I think ruining the mood during sex would be fantastic. Most of would say, no, it's a little bit of a thumbs down. But it may not be a -3. You may not be like, listen, it's not the worst thing to ever happen to you, but it's annoying. So maybe it's a -1. If you ruin the mood during sex, notice I haven't said a single thing here about condoms or kids knocking the door or the dog barking. I'm just saying ruining the mood during sex. In and of itself, how bad do you think that is? And a person goes, I mean, like a -1, like it's annoying, but whatever, you'll deal with it. Then for belief strength, we say, how likely do you think it is that using a condom is going to ruin the mood during sex. Right? Now we learn a little bit more. If a person had said that ruining the mood during sex that's a negative one, it's just not very desirable, not the worst thing in the world, it's just undesirable. Now it's going to be really important to know, because there's a negative there, how much they think that putting a condom on or using a condom is going to ruin the mood. If they say, well, it's really unlikely, okay, well, that score is going to be a -1. Okay, so that's not going to do much to deter them from using a condom. But if they say, oh my gosh, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to happen, but it's very likely to. If they said it was a 6, that means the score is a -6, right? That is a more harsh evaluation of using condoms. And again, it scale from -21, right? Because we sort of, right, -3 times 7 to +3 times 7. The highest score could be -21 to +21. But a -6, that means it's a slightly poor evaluation of condom use, at least on this particular component of the attitude. Let's look at another example. This one not about condoms. You're welcome. Right, so here this is about recycling water bottles. And so we ask a person, helping the environment is, right? And they'll probably say, it's a 2. It's fairly desirable to help the environment. I mean, maybe these are even a 3. I'm going to give it a 2 just because I'm trying to stay away from extremes for the most part here, I guess, right? So how much do you think then recycling a water bottle is going to help the environment? So we have a 2. If a person, again, were to say a 1, then our score is a 2. Out of a possible 21, or -21 to +21, there are 2 that's pretty weak. Now, if they go, well, let's go to the extreme like I don't usually do. Let's say they say, yes, recycling a water bottle really will help the environment. I really think it's going to. Well, in that case, their score is 14. Well, that's not so shabby. I mean, getting up to 21 would be even better. But at least a 14, that's pretty good. It's a heck of a lot better than a 2. Right? There are people like me who say, helping the environment is really important. For me, it's a 2, it's a 3. Helping the environment, very, very important. Do I think recycling a water bottle is going to help the environment? I am somewhere around a 4 because I know that plastic is not recycled as readily as, say, aluminum or glass or paper. Paper water bottle. Let's crack the code on that one, right? But yeah, so you get there where it's about, though, it's not just about what somebody thinks is good or bad, but then do they think they're even going to have that effect? Now let's look at a chart, and we're going to look at a behavior. This time I'm going to look at texting and driving. And I'm going to show a little bit more about how this works, looking at attitude components, belief evaluation, belief strength, just to look at all these together, really, what we've talked about so far, looking at all of it together. So on the left side, I've added in outcomes that we might associate with texting and driving. So texting and driving will cause an accident, kill someone, and when I say make plans, like allow me to make plans while I'm trying to get somewhere, right? That those what I might see as all of those as being outcomes of behavior. And notice they're all not things that we immediately think as being negative. And that's important because when we think about any behavior, often we think of both positive and negative things. I mean, recycling a water bottle is things like, I'll be stuck carrying the bottle around until I find a recycling bin. Oh yes, that is true, right? That's part of the deal. So for an individual, let us say that this is how they evaluate the various outcomes. They think causing the accident would be pretty bad. They think killing someone is the worst thing, which is a small relief. This hypothetical person believes that. But they think, gosh, making plans, that's sort of a nice thing to do. Yeah, it's a 2. Right? So what do they feel is the outcome or the likelihood? The likelihood they're going to actually have that outcome. As we move to belief strength, we're now going to look at how likely does a person believe it is they're going to experience that outcome. Right? How likely do they think it is they're going to experience that outcome? When I add those in, so causing an accident, and remember, this is a scale from 1 to 7. A person says, well, it's not the least likely thing to happen, but it's not very likely, because it's a 2 out of 7. Killing someone, they're like, I really doubt you're going to be killing somebody. Very unlikely. It's a 1. But yeah, if you're texting and driving, you can totally make plans that way. That's very likely to happen. So each one of those, working across, right, across in that row, I'm going to do a multiplication here. And the scores are for causing an accident, -2, killing someone, -3, and making plans is a +14. And I actually add all those up and I get a score of 9. Well, so what do any of those numbers in that product column mean? Let's talk about it for a moment. So as I talked about before, we take the belief evaluation scale, -3 to +3, and we multiply it by the high end of belief strength, which is 7, which means for any behavior is going to be evaluated as somewhere between a -21 and a +21. Let's just look at that first. So let's look at this behavior of causing an accident. The score is a -2. I mean, it could be worse. It could be a +21 where the person thinks that's very likely to happen. That's awesome, but that's also pretty unlikely. But the person they're not very concerned about it. So out of a possible -21 to deter them from texting and driving for fear of causing an accident, they're at a -2. It's not hardly bothering them. The part about, don't you know when you text and drive you could cause an accident? They're blowing it off because they don't think it's going to happen. It's a -2, right? Don't you know when you text and drive you could kill someone? This person's a -3 because their belief strength. They think it's so unlikely to happen. Thinks the worst thing could happen is -3, but it's so unlikely to happen that's a -3. If it had been a -21, that's probably going to stop them dead in their tracks. Sorry for the turn of phrase there, right? From texting and driving. But -3 is pretty far from -21. And then here we have, when you text and drive, at least then you can make plans. They thought that was a good thing, and they really felt it was certain to happen. That means it's a 14. It could be worse, it could be a 21, but that means that the thought that they can make plans while they're driving by texting and driving is actually very supportive, right? And out of 21, it's not all the way to 21, but it's 2/3 of the way there. That's pretty supportive of it, right? As opposed to a -21, which is a long way away. So when I add all those numbers, I get this 9. So it's a 9 out of a possible 63, right? Add up all those 21s, all those -21s, right? That 9 is out of a possible 63. It's a positive number, which does mean it's supportive of behavior. It's not super supportive of it, but it would be nice if it were a negative number, right? So that's how attitude's fitting in so far. I'm not done with attitude yet. So what do you do with these scores, right? Well, what we're going to do is identify areas for change, and the textbook does discuss this, right? If a person's belief evaluation for causing a car accident is a -1, not what we had on the other screen, but just deal with it. Right? Their belief evaluation for causing a car accident is a -1, and their belief strength is a 2, that texting and driving will lead to cause an accident. Right? As I discussed, it comes out to being, in this case, it would be a -2 because I multiply those two numbers. Okay? So one thing I might do is try to change their belief evaluation. Right? Because up here, right, up here we said they're a -1 because they don't think causing a car accident is very bad. So one of the things I might do is tell them how bad it is when you cause a car accident, like what it does to you in terms of how much money you'll be out, the way this can affect your insurance rates for years, that your insurance company may drop you, the way you may miss work while you're dealing with this. Yeah, I mean, just on and on. The person might come to think that a car accident, right, causing a car accident is actually a worse thing than -1. That's one thing to do, right? We change their belief evaluation, right, which is to say, modifying how they perceive the effects of behavior. We also might change their belief strength, right? So here the person says it's a 2. I think texting and driving will cause an accident, or lead me to cause an accident. It's just a 2 out of 7. We want to show them all the ways that we have found, right, that when you text and drive, you are much more likely to cause an accident. At least as much so, if not more so, than if you're inebriated. Like, that is true, because your eyes aren't even on the road, right? So what we do then in this case, if we know the problem is just that they don't think that they're likely to cause an accident when they text and drive, we have to try to demonstrate to them, no, you totally can cause an accident when you text and drive. I know one person who I do not respect for this at all, doesn't think much of having a couple beers and getting behind the wheel of a car because they believe that they know how to drive when they have a little bit of alcohol in them. And 2 beers isn't a whole lot, but it's not nothing, right? And it's the idea of, yeah, it'd be bad, but I know I'm fine. So in that case, you have to convince the person, no, 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 no. When you've had 2 beers, you are still much more likely to cause an accident, right, than you think. You don't think you're likely to. You are likely to. When we do the full analysis of the theory of reasoned action, or planned behavior for that matter, when we do the full analysis, these numbers may not be important because it may be something else is a much stronger indicator. But in terms of attitude, this is how we assess it, and this is how we work with those numbers. I am going to go ahead and pause here so we can then switch to talking about subjective norms in the next lecture.